We'll get to Luke chapter 12 in just a moment. But first, a story. Ross had been traveling for years abroad, and finally he returned home to England, and when he arrived at his home, he was disgusted by what he saw, and he was ready to strangle the caretakers. Well, some of you are PBS Masterpiece Theater fans like I am on occasion, and I reference a story called Poldark. It's a season of 5 seasons, and sorry, but I'm a fan. And in season 1, episode 1, it takes place in England in the Revolutionary War era, and Ross was one of those English folks who was here fighting on behalf of England, and after having returned home, he returns to his place where he was hoping to find a home that was in good order. What he found instead was everything was disheveled. Windows were broken, cobwebs covered the furniture, dust everywhere, chickens were nesting in the living room, mice were scurrying across the counter, windows, everything was disheveled, and he was looking for the caretakers. Their names, Judd and Trudy, the iconic, disgusting figures, the ones who were charged with the responsibility to care for the home while the master was indeed away. Judd! Trudy! Nobody answers. He lights a lamp. He walks through the house looking for Judd and Trudy, and he found them drunk and sleeping in the master's bedroom. It was there at that moment, that iconic moment of the master having come home to find his house in total disarray, and Judd and Trudy having abandoned their post, that Ross says these words. Ross says, "On your feet now. You were my father's personal servants. You were left in a position of trust." To which the disgusting Judd painter says, "Well, pick me liver. What could us do left alone with no master to guide us?" It set the scene for this issue of the master having to return and Judd and Trudy not ready for the return. New Hope for the last 6 days preparing from Luke chapter 12. That was the scene early on this week that was in my mind. We were placed in a position of trust. You were my Father's personal servants. And I'm here to tell you today from Luke chapter 12 that we have a message from the Savior that the Son of Man is coming at an hour we do not expect. And when he comes, there will be many people who are Judds and Trudys who are not ready for that coming. Today, Jesus has a sobering message, and he wants us to wake up. It is a very sobering passage. Of course, we're going to weave through it. We're going to hopefully bring some practical points, but at the very core of it is this. It is a sermon in a sentence. The sermon in a sentence goes like this. Here it is. It goes like, read it with me. Be useful wherever you are. Be ready whenever he comes. At the very foundation of this message is the words of Jesus, who is calling people to be useful wherever you are. Listen, wherever you are, however old you are, young or old, rich or poor, doesn't matter, male or female, as you journey through life, wherever the Lord finds you at this moment, he has put you. And this is the first critical piece to recognize, that the Lord has placed you personally in a position of trust. Not just Craig, not just a pastor, not just whatever. You have been placed in a position of trust. And as you wait for his return, you are to be useful wherever you are, and wherever you're at, you're to be ready whenever he returns. And now we come to the last one. Here it is, my friends. That amigo that hops in the back seat. Listen, it is in the back seat of so many people in northern Michigan. It's in our back seats. At times it tries to control us, and that is the amigo called apathy. It is laxity, complacency, a total disregard for what is to come. It is that lifestyle of Judd and Trudy that we truly forget, or we disregard what is to come. We know about it, we read about it, but here we have a passage in which Christ is calling us to actually be ready to do something so that apathy itself does not control the direction of our lives. New Hope, my loved ones, this is a passage that we in Vacation Land need desperately. It is a sobering passage. because it puts us face to face with our own apathy, our own complacency, our own ways in which we have allowed laxity to control the direction and disregard what is to come. So Jesus is going to raise us up the flagpole to say, guys, you got to wake up. You got to wake up. And it is a sobering passage because it will call for practical change. Now, where are we at in the storyline of Scripture? Well, here we're at. Jesus is just, listen, he is a few months away from the crucifixion. We don't know exactly, but it is a few short months. And already he has begun to plant the seeds of what is coming, like chapter 9. The Son of Man must be betrayed, handed over, crucified, die, and rise again. And the disciples did not quite understand this. He has been planting little seeds of this is what's coming. Death, burial, resurrection. Death, burial, resurrection. And only once so far has he referred to what he calls the coming of the Son of Man. That's chapter 9, verse 26. So now we come to within a few short months away from the crucifixion. New Hope, listen, if you're not familiar with the storyline of Luke, what Christ is doing is he's preparing his disciples for life without him. What would they do in the event of his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension to the right hand of the Father? How would they steward the position? And now in Luke chapter 12, he begins to have this heart-to-heart with his disciples. Listen, when I'm gone, I'm placing you in a position of trust. And how you steward that position will have huge ramifications, not only on your life, but also the perpetuation of the gospel. You are called to be a wise and faithful steward, and you have a choice. To be useful wherever you are, to be ready whenever he comes, or to totally disregard what is to come. And my friend, we're going to find out in a very sobering way that there is trouble for people who have apathy that controls the wheel. Are you ready to study the scripture? Let's take a look at it. What does Jesus want from me? What does he want from me? He wants you to be useful, and he wants you to be ready. Take a look at verse 35 with me. Jumping right into a parable. Jesus says, stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning. Keep the lights on. And be like this. Like what? Be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast so that they may open the door to him at once when he comes and knocks. It is a call to readiness. Jesus speaking to the disciples, Peter, James, John, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, and all the rest who I forget their names right now, including Judas and Simon and others. Speaking to them on a heart-to-heart level, stay dressed for action. Keep your lamps burning. Be like men, waiting, eager, joyful for their master to come. He's planting the seeds. How are you to live in light of my physical absence among you? You are to live with an expectancy and a joy of my return. Two choices, readiness or slothfulness. That is the choice before the disciples. That's the same choice before us here in Northern Michigan. Take a look with me in the next verse. Choice number one, you could receive this word, and you indeed could be ready. Readiness. Jesus says it this way. Blessed, verse 37, blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Truly, I say to you. New Hope, pause for a moment. This next phrase is remarkable. Jesus says, blessed are the servants who are awake when he comes. Truly, I say to you, what? Okay, here it is. He, the master, will dress himself for service. That is, the master will put on servant clothes, waiter clothes, and have them, who's them? The servants, recline at table, sit down. And he, the master, will come and serve them. New Hope, what a glorious picture that is. Of the master so delighted in how the servants were anticipating him that the master puts on servant clothes and serves them with great joy to honor their service, which ironically happens in just a few short chapters from now. At the Last Supper, do you recall when Jesus puts on the towel, throws open the drape across the cloth across his arm, and he takes a knee before his disciples to wash their feet? The master puts on the servant clothes to serve his disciples. Option number 2 is slothfulness. Slothfulness. Take a look with me now at verse 39. We hear a musical change, an interlude, as it were, that moves us into like this dun dun dun. But know this. Readiness, option number 1. But know this, he says, that if the master of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. Very fascinating. We have a contrast here. Contrast number 1, readiness. Master leaves, the servants are ready, they're awake, they're prepared, they're ready, doesn't matter what time of day or night, they're eager to receive the master. When he comes, he knocks on the door, they open it up, the master's overjoyed, he serves them. Option number 2, the master returns. What does he find? He finds his house like Ross found his house, disheveled, unkempt. Not only that, it has been broken into by thieves. Take a look at verse 39 again. You will notice something, that the servants are not even mentioned there. So what is the contrast? Well, here's the contrast. I believe the servants are not even mentioned. Because of this, they have abandoned their post. They were put in a position of trust, and they got distracted or they got seduced, and so they abandoned the very post that the master had put them in charge of. And so when the master comes back, what does he find? Unkempt, untidy, and a house that had been stolen of goods. Do you think the master will be pleased with those servants? No, he will not. What does it look like to live in that perpetual readiness so that you don't have to scramble at the last minute in order to get things done, which, by the way, you will not have a chance to scramble at the last minute. Why will you not have a chance to scramble? Take a look at verse 40 when Jesus says it like this. Jesus, who calls us to this place of readiness and usefulness for the kingdom, says it this way. You also, now here's the point. Peter, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, all the rest, you also must be ready. Why? For the Son of Man. Are you new to the faith? It's a reference to a messianic title used in Daniel that Jesus professed to be. He says he was the Son of Man. And here it is. Why must we be ready? Here it is. The Son of Man, that is Jesus, is coming at an hour you do not what? You don't expect. So go back to that phrase of perpetual readiness. New Hope, the whole reason why we're called to perpetual readiness is you don't know when you're going to meet the Lord face to face. Whether you go to meet him or he comes to meet us. There's a sense in which we must be perpetually ready. You will not have a chance to scramble. And the question becomes this: when the Father when Christ, the Son of Man, returns, when he comes in all of his glory, will he find you faithful, ready, useful for the kingdom, joyfully receiving him? Or will he find us like Judd and Trudy, the house in disorder? Why does it matter? Well, we have a message to the blessed and trulies, and we have a message to the Judds and Trudies. Here it is, those who are ready and useful for the kingdom. Take a look at verse 42. And the Lord said, who then is the faithful and wise manager? It's a rhetorical question. Who's the faithful steward? Who is the one who is wise and faithful, who's been given a position of trust and is found faithful in it? And he says this, whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time. That's a little confusing. Let me translate that for you very simply. Who will be found faithful so that when the master comes, he promotes that person to a place of authority? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly, I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But now we have a message, a warning. You hope this is the message where it gets sobering. There's no way around this sobering message. In fact, as we get closer to the cross, we will get more and more sobering, and we should. Because there's a gravity to this as Christ is preparing the world for what it looks like to live in a world without his physical presence. Yes, we have his presence among us in spirit, but what would the world look like without his physical presence among us? And there's a warning against apathy here about not being faithful in your stewardship. Take a look with us, a warning to the Judds and Trudies. Verse 45, musical interlude change. Dun, dun, dun. But if that servant says to himself, my master is delayed in coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants and to eat and drink and get drunk, there it is. Ross shows up, Judds and Trudies, drunk, sleeping in the master's quarters, everything is unkempt. Well, what will the master, New Hope, just stop for a moment. Do you think the master will be pleased? No. Master will not be pleased. Verse 46, take a look. The master of that servant will come on a day he does not expect him and at an hour he does not know and will, hold on a minute. Because right about now, when Jesus says this, I could just imagine Peter, James, John, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, I could just imagine their eyes like, did he just say that? Yeah, I think he did. If the master comes and he finds the servants acting out, here it is, with irreverence, with injustice, and with indulgence, that's what it is. Irreverence, the master's not coming, I can do what I want. Injustice, I'm going to beat my servants and I can do whatever I want without repercussion. Indulgence, eat, drink, be merry, nothing's going to happen to me. When the master comes and he finds his servants who are placed in a position of trust doing that, this is what the master will do. Now are you ready? Okay, now we're ready. Now he will cut him in pieces and put him with the unfaithful. Now, that sounds bad, doesn't it? Yeah? That sounds bad. Christ has given a clear warning here. And to be put with the unfaithful, by the way, a little side note here, really means that you are treated as the outsider that you are. That is, to be faithful in the kingdom, to be wise and faithful, is to be received warmly as one of his children and placed in a position of stewardship and trust. But to be figuratively cut in pieces and set apart with the unfaithful means that you are distanced from the very presence of the master. Two questions so far. What does the master want from us? Here's what he wants. He wants you to be useful wherever you are and ready for whenever he comes. Yes, church? Yes. Why does it matter? Second question. Here's why it matters. Because if we do not steward our position of trust well, the eternal ramifications are huge. Verse 54, he also said to, this is very, very important here. Who did he say this next part to? The crowds, okay? New Hope, chapter 12 has been mainly a heart-to-heart with his disciples. That's why Peter's chiming in. That's why the disciples are listening, but also are the outsiders. They're kind of like the non-committal. They're kind of around. They're listening. Why? Because Christ has certainly a following. There's people that are listening. They're skeptical. They haven't committed to following Jesus. That's going to be very important for what Jesus says next. He says to the crowds, what is the amigo in the back seat we're dealing with? Apathy. What does apathy tend to do? Waste time. We don't pay attention with what's right in front of us. We disregard what's to come. And so people like me and you, we're guilty of complacency, laxity. We get consumed with things that just don't matter when we ought to be paying attention with things that are right in front of us with meaningful purpose to be ready for the kingdom. And this is how Jesus ends his comments to the crowds. Take a look with me. Verse 57, and why do you not judge for yourselves what's right? It's a great question, New Hope. Stop for a moment. Judge for yourselves. Think about this for a moment. If everything I'm saying is true, everything about the kingdom is true, think about what you should do. Judge for yourselves what's right. Think about this. And then he tells this parable. As you go with your accuser before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, lest he drag you to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer put you in prison. I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the very last penny. Peter, James, Andrew, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew. Did he just say that? Oh, yeah. What's he mean? I'm not sure. That sounds bad. Yeah. We shouldn't do that. No. Magistrate, judge, guilt, going to jail, and you're going to get out, and you're never going to get out until you pay every last penny. Listen, in the midst of all of that symbolism comes one central point. If you as a person find yourself at a place in life where you are guilty before a judge, Jesus has this word. It's right there in verse 58. He says, make an effort to what? Read it. To settle, to be reconciled. Make an effort to be reconciled, settle with him on the way. I love that phrase, New Hope. It is a call to, listen, in that moment, when you recognize that you're guilty before the judge, you got to make every effort possible, to use every effort within your time, to make use of that time, use the time wisely so that you get right with that judge before you get there, before that day of reckoning comes. I think that there's a sense in which Jesus is now completing this whole Luke chapter 12 with an urgency to the crowds to say, guys, now is the day of salvation. Now the time is right. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 6, in which Paul is pleading with the people, now's the right time. Now's the day of salvation. Make use of the time wisely. Listen, if you are outside of the faith, this would be an urgent appeal for you to get right with God, to be reconciled to him before that day of reckoning. Isn't that good news or what? This is where all of a sudden it's like, okay, how do I be ready? How do I be useful? You get right with God. And if you are in the faith, as a follower of Jesus, you recognize, well, I got to make use of my time wisely. Make use of my time wisely. Think of it this way. Here it is. Next slide. Time is running out. Get right with God while you can. Think of all the ways in which we waste time. I bought a novel. I'll end this way. I bought a novel for my wife this past spring, and it's a novel about 3 generations of Italian women. It kind of traces their story. And I opened it up, and on page 1 was worth the whole book. I probably am not going to read the book. It's kind of like a girl thing, you know. But I did open it up, and page 1 was worth the price of admission. The author, Adriana Trigiani, writes these words. She says, when looking at the past, one must consider 3 things: the evil done, the good left undone, and the time wasted. And here Jesus in Luke chapter 12 is stepping into the midst of time and saying, my friends, look back on your life. It's healthy to reflect on the evil that's been done and the good that's been left undone, but more importantly, perhaps, is the amount of time that is wasted. And so now we look forward. Okay, Father, you've called me and challenged me on this issue of apathy, complacency, laxity, and how often we allow that to direct the course of our lives. Lord, you called me to be ready, not slothful. You've called me to be useful wherever I'm at. You've called me to be ready whenever you come. And so, New Hope, this is now where I pray, and I have been praying this weekend, that the Spirit of God would minister to each and every person as he has done with me already. What would need to change in your life to have a perpetual readiness for the kingdom? And what would need to go in your life so that your life is more useful for the King of Kings, so that when he comes and you meet him face to face, that he would find you to be a wise and faithful steward who has stepped into your position of trust and handled it with great discretion.